Hi friends, my name is Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. So I guess you may have been paying attention to Representative Ilhan Omar, and I hope that's how you pronounce her name. She's getting a lot of heat from some of her Democratic colleagues like Nancy Pelosi and Juan Vargas and people like that. Juan Vargas accusing her of anti-Semitism, and they're basically the Democrats now are going to sort of present some sort of resolution on the floor. They've already chastised her once for just stating a fact that the Israel lobby influences Congress. That's a fact. I mean, you can read it even in the rag, the Washington Post, which is sort of just a corporate-owned CIA sort of publishing tool, basically. You can read it there where in 2015 they give about $2 million a year. It's probably more than that because it's likely that they give to people who then give indirectly to these Congress members or whatever for their re-election and so forth. But the Israel lobby has tremendous influence on these U.S. Congress members. So Ilhan Omar is really, she's a Muslim, she's a black Muslim woman whose parents were refugees from Sudan, I think, or is it Somalia? Somalia, sorry. So, you know, this is sort of, it goes beyond somebody saying something that Democrats within her party disagree with. It's more than that. It's actually, somebody said this to me today, an uppity black person, an uppity Muslim, you know, the word uppity, you know how they used to describe black people in earlier times that were daring to step outside of their role, their position, their station in society. And this is partly what's going on here. You know, it's a sort of a racist thing, that whole thing of, you know, uppity. And this is sort of partly, this is playing a part in this criticisms of Ilhan Omar. First, you know, with her stating that AIPAC has influence on U.S. Congress members, which is just stating a fact. And the fact that she's Muslim makes it, you know, they immediately think, well, she's Muslim, so she must be anti-Semitic. That's the first thing. Then the fact that she's black and Muslim and wears a hijab, they don't even want her there, really, you know. It's like there's probably a whole bunch of, there was about 12 different Jewish groups that were asking Nancy Pelosi to basically remove Congresswoman, is she a Congresswoman? I don't know, I'm sorry, I get a little confused with the positions in U.S. Congress. I'm not from the U.S. But anyway, I'll call her Representative Ilhan Omar too. She's only been in a couple of months now, and they've already been chastising her about this criticism of AIPAC, and these 12 prominent Jewish groups want her to be removed from the Foreign Affairs Senate Committee, you know, where she was questioning Elliot Abrams, the war criminal that's the point man to try and overthrow the democratically elected government of Venezuela. And she really gave Elliot Abrams a serving of truth, and he didn't like it because she was a black Muslim. She was black and Muslim. You know, it's like a double whammy as far as Mr. White Supremacy, Mr. Elliot, death squads are okay, Abrams. So this is, you know, sort of partly what's driving this, I think. The uppity, in quotes, black Muslim woman who's stepped outside of her position as, you know, the sort of underdog that should be kind of just bowing and scraping to the white supremacists, and just be glad we're not throwing you out of the country, that kind of thing. You know, it's truly, and if this sort of demonstrates anything too, what it demonstrates is the lengths. If the Democrats are bringing a resolution onto the floor that actually isn't going to call out Omar by name, but it may as well, and it is, they're trying to make it anti-Semitic to sort of criticize Israel. This is actually what they're trying to bring as a resolution, to shut her up and to shut up anybody else who dares bring into the light the fact that Israel has undue influence, is a foreign influence on the country, on the government. And it is. It's not anti-Semitic to call something out like that. And even, as I said, the RAG, the Washington Post, which is generally a government mouthpiece, has mentioned that too. They've done an essay about it. Now, so apparently it's okay for, the Washington Post to talk about that, and it's okay possibly even for white people to talk about that if they, maybe, I don't know. I don't think it's okay in the Democratic Party because they receive so much, they receive a lot of donations and free trips and all sorts of things from the Israel lobby, from AIPAC. And in reciprocation to that, the U.S. gives them $10 million a day and supports the apartheid state that they have going there, where Palestinians, the UN has said, that Israel, the Israeli government, and the Israeli occupation army, they call it defense forces, but it's an occupation army, is responsible for crimes against humanity. What they've been doing to Palestinians, sniping them, executing them, children, medics, paraplegics, journalists. They've been executing people at the Great March of Return since March 30th, 2018. And it's ongoing every day. Children. There's been children executed. Dozens executed. So the UN has recently, put out a report saying that Israel is responsible for crimes against humanity. And yet, sort of that's what the US is supporting, and that's what AIPAC is trying to, with their donations to the US Congress, in reciprocation, those US Congress people support any actions that, any sort of bills that support the ongoing apartheid situation in Israel. I think it was in this particular Washington Post article, they said that the AIPAC, the Israel lobby, gave Congress, I think it was $1.6 million, $1.7 million to ditch the Iran deal. And that is a really bad thing, the Iran deal, which, by the way, the Iranians are still trying to uphold, even though Trump has rejected that. But I mean, see, this is the Democrats and the Republicans are both very pro-Israel because they receive so much money. I mean, Trump has received an enormous amount of money from Sheldon Adelson, who wants to see Iran invaded. And that's why ever since Trump has got in office, he has continued to put Iran in the crosshairs, because Sheldon Adelson is one of the biggest contributors to the GOP and to him personally in his campaign. So, they are beholden to Sheldon Adelson, and he is majorly pro-Israel. He is, and he wants Iran destroyed. So anyway, this ridiculousness that's going on in relation to Ilhan Omar, who's been recently elected, is because she dared to bring into the light the great influence of the Israel lobby. And that's a no-no. You can talk about Saudi Arabia's influence or the NRA, the National Rifle Association's influence. You can talk about those sort of things, but you cannot, it's verboten to talk about the Israel lobby and its influence. And if anybody wants to know the kind of influence and the extent of influence that the Israel lobby does, including smearing people, like it's over in the UK, they have influence in the UK and here. They've been trying to continue to smear Jeremy Corbyn for supporting pro-Israel, for supporting Palestinians in this apartheid state of Israel. And that's sort of that is something they don't want brought into, they don't want their issues discussed. They know they're losing the propaganda war, and so they are doing everything they can and calling it anti-Semitic for anybody to criticize Israel or anybody to criticize the huge influence the Israel lobby group has. And I invite you to check out the documentary posted on the Electronic Intifada called The Lobby, which is a documentary. It was an undercover investigation to look into the influence of the Israel lobby in the UK and the US, and it's significant. It's really quite frightening and amazing. So, you know, and that documentary was banned by the Al Jazeera was supposed to air it, and I don't know who, I don't know, it was Qatar or the United Arab Emirates, but whoever owns Al Jazeera got some sort of threat from somewhere and said that Al Jazeera could not air it. But eventually the Electronic Intifada got a hold of it, and now you can see it online, and it's really worth watching. It's a 4-part series. So it's very clear. The evidence is there, and I mean, it's out. It's just the fact that a black Muslim has been talking about it openly, and that is a big no-no because, you know, there's a lot of Islamophobia, deep Islamophobia, and there's a lot of racism, and it's like the whole, you know, how dare you, you're supposed to play the rules, you know, the Democratic Party rules, which is to always support anything that's, you know, pro-Israel, that you are never to criticize Israel. I mean, that is supposed to be the unspoken rule. So, you know, she's done, as far as they're concerned, she's done a big no-no. She's done a big no-no, and she's broken that unspoken rule that you are never to criticize Israel and never to talk about AIPAC in any unfavorable way and so forth. So it's interesting. Ilhan Omar talks about the Democratic Party itself in a very favorable way, as if it's something that's good, right? And yet she is actually critiquing various things like interventionism. As far as I know, she is against the unelected and self-appointed Juan Guaido, who has appointed himself as president of Venezuela, even though they already have an democratically elected president, Maduro. And she does not agree with that. Now I notice that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has been reluctant to say anything to criticize interventionism, and has actually put out some propaganda that Venezuela is an example of a failure of democracy, which is a big fat lie. It's totally. She's either putting forth a deception or she is clueless about it. But it's whatever her motivation was for that, it was unhelpful, because that is pro-regime change type propaganda that she's putting out there. As far as the U.S. is concerned anyway. I mean, there's plenty of failures of democracy. Look at the U.S. The U.S. is an oligarchy. It's not a democracy. So anyway, they can't look in the mirror though. Anyway, so Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has actually started defending Ilhan Omar instead of what she was doing a few weeks ago, which was patronizing her. And she also, I'll show you a few tweets by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So anyway, these were beneficial tweets from AOC, but the thing is that I sort of feel like with her that it's going to be a bit like Bernie Sanders. It's going to be a back and forth depending on the day, depending on the audience and so forth. I just don't feel like she is going to be consistent on any of that in relation to foreign policy, and I'm sure that they will wrap her on the knuckles for speaking about foreign policy. I'm sorry to sound pessimistic about her. I'm not trying to be. I was actually quite hopeful, but I sort of feel like anybody who is in that party, the Democratic Party, and that includes Tulsi Gabbard, it's a party that is a warmongering, corporate-loving party. They serve their corporate overlords. And so I don't see how it could possibly work out, if you're a true progressive, how it could possibly work out within that party. That's just my feeling about it. I don't see how it could. So anyway, I suppose just for today anyhow, AOC did the right thing and stood up for her friend, but stood up also against the stupidity of Representative Juan Vargas, who was sort of saying it's anti-Semitic to criticize Israel and and all this kind of thing, and was was chastising Ilhan Omar in public, as a lot of them have been doing. And she stood up for her and sort of said, we should be able to question these things about foreign policy. When did it become a problem to question foreign policy? So, but anyway, the Washington Post, sadly, but predictably, has put out an awful piece saying that basically Representative Ilhan Omar is like the what's his name, right-wing racist from the GOP. Really awful. He sort of he's said some really racist stuff about Obama and stuff like that. God, I can't remember his name now. I'm sorry. I'm not familiar with these people's names. I very rarely pay attention to. Anyway, I'll finish that sentence and then I'll tell you what I was about to say. Basically, the Washington Post article says that Ilhan Omar is to the left what this Steve somebody or other, who's a real racist right-winger, is to the right. So basically, calling her some extreme sort of nutter, anti-Semitic nutter sort of thing, which is charming and disgusting. It's just Islamophobic, dreadful nonsense. But that's the Washington Post, and a lot of, Islamophobia is just below the surface. And but anyway, what I was going to say is that I don't pay a lot of attention to the daily goings-on in the U.S. Congress, because I feel like it's so far gone, and it's so sewn up, how the warmongering and the serving the corporate overlords, and really not interested at all, either the GOP or the Democratic Party, the DNC. They're not at all interested in doing anything for people, Medicare for all and all those kind of things. And they will say anything at the moment to get elected. They'll flout, they'll exploit this whole diversity thing with different people saying, look, we've got Muslims in the party and we've got black people and yada yada, look what a diverse party we are, and look at the GOP. I mean, this is all exploiting exploiting identity politics is what it's doing. And that's what I feel like this is part of, they're using these people who they'll probably do their best to get rid of Ilhan Omar as soon as they get in through nefarious means, and probably the same with if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez starts getting serious and speaking consistently. If she starts speaking consistently about foreign policy and really talking against interventionism, talking against these perpetual wars and so forth, they will not like that, because they cheer on war, they are for war, they love war, the Democratic Party, and so does the GOP. If anybody is really against interventionism and against war, the Democratic Party will do their best to get rid of them. But meanwhile, they can use them to make the party look good, to make it look like it's the party, once again, of diversity and all that nonsense. It's just exploiting these people, basically. That's really all I wanted to say about that. I brought out a little device to read a couple of things, but it actually clapped out on me and it ran out of batteries, so unfortunately I can't. But I'll show you a few memes, and you can sort of think about those things yourself. I was going to talk about them, but I can't read them now. And one more thing I wanted to say about, the Democratic Party, people like Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer is a great Wall Street lover, And Wall Street is one of the 5 biggest firms on Wall Street are the greatest shareholders in the weapons industry. So that should tell you something about Chuck Schumer. And, you know, the weapons industry is an advertiser on the mainstream media. The weapons industry, you know, like Boeing and Raytheon and all those different ones, they are well and truly sort of intertwined inextricably with the Democratic Party, with the GOP, with the corporate media. And so they are not going to let anything interfere with the ongoing warmongering that they do. After Venezuela, if it fails or if it succeeds, I hope it fails. It looks like it's failing, but if they may militarily invade, and I really hope that Russia becomes involved at that point if they do, because I think Venezuela is going to need some help. Otherwise, it's going to be terrible bloodshed. After Venezuela, it will be Iran. They're already doing things in Iran. They're already trying to. They overthrew the government decades ago, and they overthrew Mossadegh, and they put in the Shah, and then the Iranians threw out the Shah, and they've never really forgiven them since then, the U.S. And here they go again. But there's been constant meddling from the U.S. anyway. They constantly meddle. I'll show you that meme again, basically with the list of democratically elected governments they've overthrown in the last, since 1946, and the ones successfully and the ones they've attempted to. And as you see, I mean, note that I put Venezuela there, but I haven't put an asterisk there, which means I'm hoping that they won't have been successfully overthrown. It'll just be an attempted overthrow. But I think that the US is so desperate to get its hands on the vast reserves of oil there, which are greater than Saudi Arabia, that I think they may actually militarily invade. And one thing I did want to say about that is that Guaido has made an appearance in Venezuela. He's been hiding out in Colombia because he probably thinks they're going to arrest him because he's a traitor, basically. He's basically inviting another government of another country to invade his country so that he can be the king, he can be the president. He's basically inviting them to invade his country. So, I mean, he's looking at 30 years in prison, I think. That's what I think the vice president of Venezuela mentioned. He's come back to Venezuela, and I think this could possibly be, from what I've gathered, an attempt to provoke. It'll probably be something like he'll either be kidnapped or somebody will attempt to assassinate him. And I think this will probably be the opposition that will do it, not the Maduro forces, because he's been, so much for the dictator thing, he's been allowed into the country even though he's inviting an invasion. And, his followers are all sort of protesting and stuff. And, if this was a real dictatorship, that wouldn't be happening. But anyway, so he's come back into the country, and I think this is like he's being bait, like he's being used as bait. And Pence has said if anything happens, Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States, has said if anything happens to Juan Guaido, that, that'll be basically an invitation to invade Venezuela, that sort of thing. He didn't say it as explicitly as that, but that's what that meant. And so I'm expecting, I'm sure other people are expecting, that somebody will attempt to either kidnap him or attempt to assassinate him or something like that, or even assassinate him. I mean, the US doesn't care about Juan Guaido. They've been grooming him for 10 years or so for this mission to help overthrow Venezuela. And silly him thinking the US has any loyalty to him. They don't give it. The national security state doesn't give a toss about people. They have interests. They don't have allies. They don't have people that, they only protect people if they can still continue to use them. Otherwise, they don't care. So he may actually get killed, which is bad. I don't wish that on anybody. That's a terrible thing. But this could be the next, the next Plan C. The coup failed. and things are not shifting like the US want them to. They're like a petulant child. And this is the next step, you know, dangling Juan Guaido as bait, in quotes, and hoping that somebody will, even if it'll probably be the opposition, and it'll be like a setup, like a false flag for an invasion. So that's unfortunate. But anyway, that's all I really want to say. I'm sorry if it's a little sloppy, my presentation sometimes. Sometimes I forget names, and I try to be specific, but sometimes, you know, names escape me, and so I tend to give general sort of explanations about stuff. If people really want to find out the details, you know, it's easy to find them out if you're following independent news, and I can leave some links. But this time I'll remember to leave some links. Sometimes I say that and I forget. But watch that wonderful documentary by the Empire Files. I know I mention them often, but that's because they're just such a splendid independent news source, the Empire Files with Avi Martin, and watch their most recent thing about Venezuela. It's called the Ocean of Lies. It starts off with that title. So check that out, and I will try and remember to put that in the information section. So that's all I really wanted to say. And if you can, support Ilhan Omar on Twitter. I hope that she always stays strong. Like I said, I can't see how anybody can belong to that awful, forsaken party. It's just an awful party. But I don't know how anybody can belong to that and actually be anti-interventionist and anti-war and for Medicare for all, and actually get anywhere within a party like that. It's sort of so far gone in many ways. But I hope that she stays strong and sticks to, she says some weird stuff about, you know, the party itself, like it's something good, and I find that disturbing, but her anti-interventionist position is good. She's for the BDS, the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement, which is to end the apartheid situation for Palestinians and end the blockade and all of that. She is for that, and that is a real no-no in the Democratic Party, right? So that's another thing she's sticking her neck out for. So it's really good to support somebody like that, you know, like retweet things that she says, you know, on Twitter. Like follow her on Twitter and give her support. Like they had a hashtag today, and social media today is used as a propaganda tool by the national security state. It really is. So we have to counter that. And so if there was a hashtag today, I stand with Ilhan Omar, and that was the whole thing about, you know, her criticism of her correct criticism of AIPAC, and then this slur of anti-Semitism, right? So, you know, things like that, you can sort of retweet positive tweets about Ilhan Omar at times like that, or just in general, and give her the support, because this actually is bringing an issue which will help Palestinians by highlighting the issue that Israel is being given $10 million a day, and it is, according to the UN, this is not sort of, you know, left-wingy stuff, according to the UN, is committing human rights abuses every day at the Great March of Return, but it's been doing so for for decades now, since the Nakba, since Britain, some other country gave Palestine away. Basically, it's been under assault, and there's been a slow, ongoing ethnic cleansing, a genocide of Palestinians. So, you know, anything that it highlights the fact that the Israel lobby is influencing Congress, and that and Israel would not be able to continue this ethnic cleansing of Palestinians if it wasn't getting $10 million a day from the US and had the full support of the US. It wouldn't be able to continue. So it is very good that she is highlighting a fact, and talking about a fact about AIPAC is not anti-Semitic. It is just a fact. So it is really important that we support people like that. So I hope that AOC follows in that footsteps in relation to anti-interventionism, but I'm not holding my breath, but it's good what she did recently on Twitter, and so I retweeted her tweets about anti-interventionism, but I honestly, like I say, I don't see how anybody can continue in that party and not end up falling into line with their warmongering, and, you know, at best just not saying anything. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say. So thank you so much for the comments that you leave. I appreciate them. Please subscribe if you like the content. Just click the subscribe button and click the notifications bell. I hear that you have to click it twice, otherwise you don't receive all the updates. So please click that notifications bell twice. Click the like button if you like the content, and always leave comments. I always enjoy comments, and as long as they're civil. And so that's all I wanted to say. So thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. Oh, can you see the paddy melons in the back there? They come up to visit every evening. There's about 24 of them. They're like small kangaroos. You can see them hopping around there. So they come up outside the house, and we give them little paddy melon pellets. They're just little grass, sort of condensed nutritional grass pellets, and they have a little nosh on that, and then they go about their business. So they come up from the forest, and then they go about their business and visit whomever else. No, I don't think anybody else feeds them around here, but we give them a little bit, and they're happy with that, and some carrots. They love that too. Anyway, so thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye for now. So I wanted to add something to this piece I've done about Ilhan Omar, and I wanted to share something from Mint Press News editor-in-chief, which I'm a bit sorry, it's a bit tricky. I don't have a setup inside the house, so that's why I do it outside. But so I have to read off this device. It's a bit tricky. But anyway, I'm going to share this by Manar Muharesh from Mint Press News, who's the editor-in-chief. And she said about Ilhan Omar, Ilhan Omar represents everything the establishment hates. She's a black Muslim woman wearing hijab who is not afraid to speak the truth about war, special interests, and money in politics. The smears against her are getting worse by the day, from calling her anti-Semitic for pointing out the Israel lobby's influence on politics, and a campaign tying her to 9/11 because she's Muslim and speaking out against white supremacy. She's even gone as far as calling out U.S. war crimes in South America, Iraq, and Yemen. Before she mentioned Israel's influence on our government, she called out weapons manufacturers, oil companies, and the 1% profiting off of the exploitation of people at home and abroad. Prior to that, she called out U.S. support for Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen and the Saudis' influence on politics. Yet the media freaked out when she mentioned Israel. What's even more is that the Democrats have remained largely silent against the attacks against her, and in many cases jumped in to repeat the smears. I'm also disappointed by those who consider themselves quote-unquote woke or allies of the peace movement, including many of my own friends who have fallen for the smears against her because we're becoming too lazy to think critically through these headlines and articles made to demonize and dehumanize her. What's happening is a clear character assassination against someone who is courageously opposing war and exposing the powers that be who have destroyed our democracy. When Ilhan apologized for her comments about the Israel lobby's influence, she made sure she apologized for the way it was interpreted, but stood by her words. However, her apology is still being taken out of context and used to belittle her cause for peace. Minnesota local media, like the Pioneer Press, is framing her as anti-Semitic by only publishing articles where they speak to pro-Zionist religious groups instead of actually dissecting how lobby groups influence government. That is not journalism. What a disappointment. She could even say the most perfect thing and her words would still be used out of context, and the establishment would find anything to turn it around on her. Just some random thoughts. So that's by Manar Muharesh, editor-in-chief of Mint Press News. So I totally agree with Manar. I have great respect for her, and I believe that is true. What they're doing to her, it wouldn't matter what she said. They are trying to put her in her place and shut her up about foreign policy, shut her up about Israel and their lobby groups, lobbying Congress, and so forth. It's really appalling. But anyway, that's really all I wanted to interject in here. I just saw that after I did the video, and so I wanted to add that in.